Something more like New York.
There you go.
Part of New York, Maine.
Okay, alright. So, promotion and outreach. Does anybody want to start us off with anything? Do you want us to share our stories of growing pains? What do you guys think?
Sure, why don't you start?
There's a lesson learned. There's a lesson learned.
There's many lessons.
And if anyone feels inspired and thinks something should be captured, we have a nice little sheet up here and some good markers.
Yes. Are they smelly markers?
Is that good or
Does that
bad?
make you happy?
I need my fix. You want them?
She's just asking for a friend, is that it?
Flavored, not flavored.
The actual sense. I guess one of the most interesting aspects of starting out the Atlanta chapter for us, basically the Atlanta chapter was very active a few years ago, and we started working together in the summer, and we needed a lot of training, and NTEN seemed like a great organization, but we are in a nonprofit, so we're like, what if we start an Atlanta chapter? We can get all this training at a discount. Awesome. Which, to be fair, I think a lot of people do that. At least I'm hoping a lot of people do that.
Yes.
But I found it very interesting trying to find partners for our group. I've had people who have talked to me about setting up mentors, and they're actually headhunters, which was interesting. So they're trying to snag people from our, chapter group. What else have we had?
We've had feedback from past groups, from the past Atlanta club, finding out why did it dissolve? What did people like about it a few years ago, and what made them not want to come anymore?
Yeah.
And in Atlanta's case, it was having, people start out as partners, but then it slowly turns into more like sales pitches while you're at the meetings. And none of us want that.
Yeah,
So,
we don't want to advocate that. I think those are the two biggest. Do you guys have any challenges for partnerships? I think it's a great opportunity, but we're looking for guidance as well.
I just have a general question that we've been dealing with in Seattle, which is we're having our semi-annual crisis of identity.
Only semi-annual?
Yeah, and it's, who are we for? Does everybody use the Meetup platform? Or so a lot of people use Meetup, and of course that's open. Pretty much anybody can join, which is great. It makes it really accessible. But what it means is we have a diverse in terms of interest population.
Right.
So we have people who are, we call them, can't think of a better term, but tech do-gooders who don't work at nonprofits, so they work at Zillow or someplace and they want to use their tech skills for good.
Yeah.
Then we have some nonprofit techies, and we have some nonprofit fund development people. Is that kind of the population that most people have, or? Yeah.
We've had
Yeah.
some startups too.
Yeah, I think that's a big challenge with promotion, because you want to cast your net as wide as possible, because always we're trying to bring in new members and get people involved with us, but at the same time, you want to be able to keep it focused on why are we here, what's your purpose. If it is just wanting to find opportunities to help out, the nonprofit community in any way you can, I think that's okay, but it's definitely, trying to set a specific goal in mind for your group. Does anybody have those experiences of?
We actually discourage vendors from coming to our groups.
Really?
We have other avenues to get nonprofits and volunteer vendors. We have another program that does that. So and that's not so much by my doing, but literally over, our group's been in existence for 17 years, I think. So it's been, and I've taken care of it for 11 of those years. I get feedback from the participants when vendors show up and they get salesy that we don't want them here. Get rid of them. And so they've been involved with me to be the bad guy, but and anybody can sign up. I don't limit anybody, but if a vendor signs up, I do send them a nice little email before saying, solicitation before, during, and after the meeting is absolutely unacceptable.
Right.
So, and that's not to say if they have a conversation with somebody at the meeting, it's fine, exchange business cards, but don't sit there and hijack the meeting to talk about your
Right,
product.
push your
you know.
product or your services.
Yeah, so a lot of them, they get that email and they just don't come back after the first time.
Really?
And that's fine by me.
But that's good to have that communication ready to go, so you know as soon as somebody's interested in attending a meeting, you can go ahead and send out that blanket notification to them. So they're aware before they come, and like you said, they can still choose to come, but they just know the rules that they're playing within.
Well, I know there's lots of other tech groups sitting in this room where like you have vendors and nonprofits
Yeah.
equally, and they
Find
love
that
each other and it works well. It's just,
Yeah.
my nonprofit people don't want the vendors there. I don't know.
Yeah, so I do the Drupal online community, and so we don't have the in-person
Yeah.
aspect to deal with. But we, on our monthly calls, we do tend to have a pretty even balance between the vendors and the nonprofit staff. But we're also very clear in sort of the rules of the road is that the vendors are not there to sell. The vendors are there to share their expertise from building multiple websites that nonprofit staff don't necessarily have. So we have very good back and forth conversation where the vendors are able to participate and provide good information, but it's not sales. There's no selling involved, and they're also not allowed to talk about hiring. Where that was a decision we made because that's just not appropriate for the conversation that we're having during our very limited 1 hour call per month.
Do you have a written set of ground rules? Like, do you publish something, or is it just a?
Well, there's the NTEN community rules, and then we also have at the top, we do a collaborative notes document for each call, and at the top we have some general guidelines about what is and isn't appropriate for the call.
The NTEN code of conduct is very good. We link to that. And it's pretty clear on vendor participation.
Okay.
And they control it well in the discussion forums and the general one. Sometimes somebody says something they shouldn't, and somebody's on it right away.
Policing our own people. So kind of along the line, not fully vendors, but something we've had luck with in at least reaching out and starting a conversation is with for-profit partners. In our case in Atlanta, there's a company called General Assembly. I know they have some locations across the country. And I don't think they've been in Atlanta for too long, so they're still looking for all kinds of partnerships. And I mean, they're a great resource for having, offering the classes to people and taking workshops. And so they were actually one of the first groups that we talked with when we were first starting up the Atlanta chapter to see what we could learn from their model that really works well as far as bringing in people and really having a high population in all of the workshops and classes, but then also trying to figure out how do we work with a for-profit group. And there were some cases when we're talking with them that it's, you get the vibe from them that it's like, well, this isn't really benefiting us, so we're out for a while. But conversations like that I think are really important for us to keep trying and working at. Does anybody have kind of for-profit connection?
Well, I actually am a for-profit consultant as well, and I started the group, and I have a trouble kind of getting others consultants in the area involved, because I think it's my thing, and maybe it is, but but I have a list from the Community Foundation with their signed off consultants. So we now have 2 events, one in April or May, one in May and one in July, where I think consultants can contribute as a panel very much to it. Yeah, one would be about boards working together, and I know there are quite a few consultants that do board governance kind of thing. And then the other one is volunteer management. And those 2 topics are something I don't know really anything about it, except for managing my own time. So I'm sending out letters and kind of ask them to be on the panel. But it is that finite list of consultants that comes from the Community Foundation.
So that meeting where you have other consultants, who's the audience? Is that your regular audience, or do you have a different audience in mind?
No, that's the same. That's a non-profit audience. Yeah, we have a few consultants in there, but one is a PR marketing kind of consultant, but she works with a lot of nonprofits. each one of those nonprofits should actually put her on staff. Funding.
I'm sorry, is it the technical aspects of those two areas, or is it actually broadly like volunteer management?
No, it's gonna be the tools for volunteer management.
Okay.
Yeah, but I have found if you don't introduce the topic as kind of what is the goal of things to do, yeah, and which area tools can help, the tool is really just kind of talking about feature list and so how do I actually use them? Yeah, it's for our group very, very important. So you just have the problem to solve and then the tools.
How many tools would you introduce?
Well, it comes out of the discussion, yeah. I
Okay.
don't know what the consultants are gonna say. Maybe they don't have a tool, and I probably need to kind of get a list out of it. So this is my backup tool. But yeah, I don't, yeah.
Great. Does anyone else have experience with that stuff?
Up in the front.
Yeah, just something on the promotional piece. So in New York, I'm sure in other places too, space is always an issue. Getting space. So what we've done is we've partnered with Change.org 1 year. We've partnered with Idealist.org for many years. A for-profit company called Purpose that works with nonprofits. And our new home is going to be at Glisten, which is a nonprofit. But previously for Purpose, Idealist, and Change, in terms of promotion, we asked them as part of being the hosts of our space if they could promote our events on their platforms, on their social media, through their email. To varying degrees of success, but it was just another outlet because they have different audiences than we're reaching through our Facebook page or through our email.
Yeah, and I've seen a lot of other groups use places like General Assembly and other co-working spaces for that same reason, which is they already have their own audience.
Yeah.
And so you get to both bring whoever you found plus whoever's coming through those spaces as well. And I love the idea of signing an annual contract, like being really explicit, like these are the dates. Because the hardest part often, especially for those doing physical events, is finding that venue month after month. And if you can have that problem solved, then you get to put your energy in other places.
Yeah, and just one more thing on that too is that if it's a nonprofit, NTEN will often offer a free membership for that nonprofit for the year. As a thank you, that might be a secret.
I think we all need to brush
as a
up
thank
on
you, so like
benefits.
for Glisten, for example, Glisten's going to get an organizational nonprofit
Very nice.
for the year, for hosting us for the year, because it's such a premium type space in New York City.
That's Chris Tuffle.
Yeah, it's Chris Tuffle, yeah.
Okay, right. No, that's correct. Big believer.
Awesome. Where does everyone else host? Do you find an organization to help?
Venue is tomorrow.
We host at WeWork. I don't know if there are any
Parking lot
WeWorks in
venues.
Atlanta, but we have several WeWorks in DC. DuPont Circle, there's a party there on Friday night. K Street, Chinatown. So we found that partnership to be really a great one because they want to promote their co-working space. And, we have a great venue for our events. And they've been so helpful with like AV equipment, for doing the presentations, microphones, everything. They don't provide food, so we've tried to get like a sponsor who will just deal directly with food. They don't pay us anything to be a sponsor. We just tell them to order the food and have it delivered. And that's been great because then we don't have to deal with any money at all.
Yeah.
And then for promotion, I'll add that we have some great email lists in DC. We have DC Web Women. We have the DC Eco Women. We have tons of different email lists where we can promote our events too. Of course, the NetSquared DC list, we have over 1,400 members now. So we try to use Twitter and Facebook as well. And so I think between all of those things, the email lists are great, and then also social media. But the last thing I'll mention is that we try to partner with other groups, like when we can. There's DC Web Mavens group, so they help to promote, our events sometime as well. So I think partnership to promote events is a little bit different than partnering on the event itself.
Yes.
And so I would just say try to find other like-minded email lists and groups that are willing to send out the message to their members, because it's great for their members as well because it's a free learning opportunity. So
the North Carolina Center for Nonprofits, which is a statewide organization that's a membership for nonprofits, not people, only for organizations, often will promote our stuff on their
Great.
email blast, because it makes them, they don't have to handle tech that way.
Right,
And,
yeah.
You know, and it makes them look like they are, because they send the email out that says, hey, here's an event, and they
Right.
kind of get credit for it.
It's the subject, but you're right. yeah.
But they do nothing
Yeah.
about it really, except show up if they want to,
Yeah.
and then some of their members, not
Just
that's
curating
helpful.
a list, really.
Yeah.
Well, we used to have one of our organizers used to work there, so it made it eager. I mean, it was easy. Now we gotta we have to ask somebody, but I think they'll still do it. That's just been a change. But I've been looking at, and I'm curious if anybody's done this, maybe partnering with a group like your local AFP, Association of Fundraising Professionals, or, because some of those
I'm
people
doing
are,
that right now.
yeah.
So our group doesn't exist yet, and we didn't get much traction in the beginning, so reached out to AFP, and somebody that works with our consulting firm is an up-and-coming president, so we have some contacts there.
Just
But
for
it-
posting the event, maybe, not even,
Well, just to promote it a little
Yeah,
bit, because
exactly.
we don't have a great Columbus, Ohio nonprofit list. We had a few national ones that have, that are subset of it. So we're gonna make it work, but I had to go meet with them, like their president and their membership chair, and it was a whole list of things that you have to do. We have to be careful about where we put the NTEN logo and all these other things. So we're gonna make it happen. My opinion was like, seriously? I mean, but.
Yeah. I mean, whenever you're dealing though with larger companies and their brand becomes,
Just a few more
a
hoops
big
to
piece
jump
of it,
through.
and most of them have coming at it from that designer angle, most of them have very detailed branding guidelines. You can only do this big and next to that thing and.
Yeah, so I guess my experience in Vancouver is most of my growth has totally come through partnerships. And mostly that's come through us being really intentional about who we invite to be our presenters, which is you want to invite people who are internet famous or have their own reputation. Basically, I'm lazy. If someone else is going to be at my event and therefore is going to promote it to their own community and do all the work for me, I'm thrilled. So some of the groups we've partnered with are the Open Data Meetup. Like we've done a joint event and brought all their members into our groups. We've partnered with the local Mozilla people. We've done like some of the digital marketing meetups, like the Google Analytics people. They're like, you come, you're the smart people, show us how it gets done. We've partnered with some of the local code academies who actually sort of are going to be doing recently some Google Analytics workshops for our members. Their students are going to basically get to show off in front of local nonprofits. So that's sort of how we've done a lot of the partnerships. We've basically gone to other organizations, leveraged their lists and their expertise, and we just sit back and look good.
What happens when you were bringing in, like, didn't you have Hootsuite for a little while as the?
So Hootsuite's a great example. We've got a social media surgery format, which is basically office hours. Basically it's 2 hours. Everyone gets a 30-minute one-on-one opportunity to ask anything. So in this case in Vancouver, we partner with Hootsuite because they have a headquarters in Vancouver. And that's a really great partnership. One, they have smart people who know social media, but just as important, we host in their offices and they bring out an extra 50 people who would never show up for our events because they just want to get close to Hootsuite. So if you've got a big technology company locally who people would love just to be in their office because they're curious, host in their office and see what happens. Like who do you have in Atlanta who's super awesome and people are kind of like, we should check that out.
Coca-Cola.
For sure.
Oh my god, people would kill to get in the Mailchimp office. They kill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, don't
Use
do
the
that.
Google Five.
Yeah.
not the monkeys.
No.
I think it's sent a chocolate monkey from MailChimp for Christmas from where they were sent out from
Well, does anyone have any last
socks.
words on the
but my
promotion
chocolate
outreach
monkey
topic?
was jointed.
To reach out to community foundations
Totally.
and have them spread it through their social networks. And I know all of our community foundations are always willing to put it on, especially if it's a free meetup.
And if you have a young nonprofit professional network,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think just to echo what everybody's pretty much said, the more you can piggyback pretty much on another organization's establishment, go for it.
I actually sorry to jump in. I recently started a nonprofit marketing and communications meetup. And all of those people, I'm like, you should all come to the NetSquared
Right.
Vancouver events because you will all need to be there.
So then you're even cross-promoting your own.
Your own stuff, yeah.
Does anybody, sorry, just one last question on this promotion topic. Does anybody promote, so for that population of people who work in tech, but don't work in nonprofits, aren't aren't consultants who work with nonprofits, is there a promotion that you do to sort of go out and grab those folks to bring them in into a relationship with the nonprofits, or is that, do you know what I mean, like that, so that somebody who works at
That kind of falls a little in your association, if you could connect those people to that. For, like, I think to bring more of those, like, well, I'm gonna pimp her for a little bit right now. So, I mean, she works for an association that actually brings together business tech folk, right? So now if you, and around the country,
just in Northeast Ohio, so.
Northeast Ohio, sorry. I meant you bigger, but either way, but to use that sort of thing, like, how could you get those folks to, and how would you, if you wanted to network them into the NetSquared or NTEN groups, meetings?
I just, I don't have these struggles because I come with a 30,000 email list of nonprofits.
She's even more magical. He almost spit on you.
Well, thank you all for letting us host. We appreciate it.
So you need to tap her, is what basically.
Everyone get her list before we
Yes.
Sorry.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
And you were at
Yes. Okay. Yes.
They were filming this?
Oh, she was transforming your group.
Yeah.
Oh, we know.
Yeah, we're,
All right.
Because they're really good about just showing it in the newsletter or putting it on our calendar.
yep. We're gonna, and Columbus Foundation's gonna host for us, they said, and they'll mail to their folks,
In Philanthropy, Ohio, I think they're happy.
which is a neighbor of ours.
Are they?
Yeah, we had drinks with them like 2 months ago, so I definitely reached out to both of them.
You have a nonprofit.
No, you know what, it's funny, I was just trying to join that. Meetup is having problems.
Groundwork group? Yes. So they do a little something like this that I was originally thinking we would just join. And as I was talking to the kind of the folks in this community, it's really hardcore, like, security, hardware, and IT focused. And there's a whole bunch of people that were like, we have a foot in, social media, we have a foot in fundraising, we have a foot in, business analytics and how to use data, data-driven decision-making stuff. And they were looking for something that was more broadly focused. So I went to a few of their meetings. I talked to some of their folks, and it tends to be more like how to run wires and how to connect computers together, and But I think there's an opportunity for us to do it with them. Right.
Completely online, and therefore all the conversation.
Right.
If you can hear me, clap 3 times. We're almost got our rhythm. One more time, we're going to do it 4 times with rhythm. You guys are amazing. We should all give you guys roles as drummers in the booth. I love it. So, we're now going to the second piece is going to be all about diversity. James and Ashley are going to run the show. I'm stepping out of the way. They have 20 minutes to blow your mind by facilitating conversation.
Who are you again?
Don't say anything you don't want Ashley to know.
I'm Turner from Vancouver, as I said. I work with Options for Sexual Health, which is probably more familiar to most folks in the room as a Planned Parenthood affiliate. So this topic's near and dear to my heart. And who are you?
And I'm James Porter. I am from New York, as I said, and I'm the Director of Communications at a global health nonprofit called the NTEN Fund. And just personally, we are a small team. There's almost 20 of us, and diversity is a hot topic in the office, especially for a small team, and how to ensure that, as Ashley will talk about a little bit, you're not just employing tokenism.
So first, let's do a little bit of an icebreaker. Can you please raise your right hand if you hear about diversity all the time?
Right.
Okay, now keep that one up. I'm going to be pulled from Amy this morning, so keep it up if you hear about diversity all the time. And now you can raise your left hand if you actually know how to do diversity properly.
Awesome, okay, cool.
So-
That's why we're here, that's why we're talking about this, that's why we wanna have this discussion. So our first question is?
Our first question is, well, first, we did want to acknowledge.
We did, thank you, yes.
We did want to acknowledge that we realize that we may not be the most diverse people, but that brings us to the first question. In what is your personal definition of diversity? Not what do you think it should be, what you have been told it is. What is your personal definition of diversity? And anybody who would like to share may, we won't call anybody out, but if you'd like to share, go ahead. There are no right or wrong.
No, there's really no right or wrong answers.
Everybody feels welcome, included, and represented, regardless of anything.
Diversity is about everything who doesn't cope with only one definition.
So the other hands, yeah.
I find that when diversity is talked about, it tends to be excluded. Like we say diversity, but we mean race is what really is the deeper. But like to me, diversity is not just race; it's sexual orientation, it's religion, which gets ignored a lot. You know, people with disabilities. There's so many different ways to slice that.
Political viewpoints.
Political viewpoints.
Gender, age.
Yeah. People have
Economic
differences,
class.
It's okay. Yeah.
So I'm thinking like in a group setting, how you have people like from all different backgrounds together. Different experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I was just going to add that in tech, that can be a big piece. Like Emily was saying that, you know, if people are coming to meetups and they've got all the tech knowledge, or if they have just a little bit of tech knowledge, and that's another form of diversity that we need to be aware of too. For me, it definitely includes race, gender orientation, sexuality, sexual orientation, accessibility around disabilities, etc. So it's a really wide range. That word means a lot, and it means something different to, I think, almost everybody. So the next question, oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, the only other thing that I would add is that something that we've been talking about at work is not just diversity, but like the why behind it and why it's important. And I think something that I've been impressing upon people is that it also brings in diversity of experience and diversity of background and knowledge, because people tend to surround themselves with networks that reflect them, if not, like somebody was saying, racially, but also reflect them socioeconomically or their background. So I think diversity also brings in a wealth of knowledge from different backgrounds that you're not going to get from somebody who looks like you or is from the same background as you.
So the next question, which is slightly different from diversity, and Stephanie kind of used this word already, what is inclusivity? What does it mean to be inclusive?
It has an intentionality about it. Well, you know, you make it, you're choosing, it doesn't happen because you can look around and say, oh, look, we have diversity, but it's about you've intentionally brought people in. You've intentionally reached out to the groups you want to be there. You've intentionally said it's important to have conversations, and it's to put a ground rule out there that we're going to bring in lots of voices. So if it's not your opinion, that's okay. We'll get around to you eventually, or just be open. So the whole intentionality.
And you've removed barriers to participation.
Be careful with your words. You're not excluding people with jargon or buzzwords or like, this is the way it is done kind of language or framing.
Certainly on a venue, certainly on a level of like if that applies to your outreach as you're talking about, and then these NetSquared and NTEN groups, and then also even on the accessibility side of like venue spaces and on the practical level.
Yeah,
Our questions.
There we go, I'm a segue.
So one of the things that we were talking about earlier when we were talking about this together is the idea of tokenism, and so the difference between kind of diversity and inclusivity and tokenism is, tokenism, we need person X to fill this role, and that doesn't really feel good to anybody. So I'm wondering, how have people not been tokenistic in their panels, in their communities? How have you made sure that you're not just, targeting someone so that you can say, check, we got that box checked off?
It's not necessarily like a community organizing experience. One of my friends, she was in hiring for for various positions, and she works in a large service organization. And, you know, she was like, a lot of times we target a lot of college networks, because a lot of people tend to be graduated from college, go into a year of service, and that's great, you know. And, you know, her thing was like, who's not at the table? Like, who are we not reaching? Who might be interested in a year of service, or capable, who would love to do this, but maybe are not in college, and they're just never getting this message. How can we get that message beyond, I guess, our normal social networks, as you guys were referencing earlier?
And is it really, I get what you mean with tokenism, but if it's intentional, is it really tokenism? So I organized the Northeastern Regional Conference Tech Now up in Pittsburgh, and one of the things that I've been very deliberate about is gender 50. You know, not that there's not one gender, but you know what I mean. Like so, male female, the ratio. I work to get it to 50% every year, because if I don't, who will at a tech conference? You know, it's a rare thing. So, but I don't feel like I don't. At the same time, and it works out every year. I don't say, oh, you're a female, your breakout session sounds like it sucks, but I'm still going to put you in the mix, because you know, like, I don't do that. You know, but I do, like, if I have an overage of male, you know, that need to find co-presenters, I say, you know, bonus points if you could find a smart female to do this with you. And somehow it works every year. I don't feel like that's tokenism.
I think, to me at least, and feel free to jump in if I'm wrong, for me, if it's done with forethought and it's done in a way that's actually including people in the conversation and not just to check a box to say, we have diversity, you know, or, oh, yep, we've got, you know, somebody from this race coming, or, you know, I think if it's done in a way that it is from the beginning with conversations with either people from a specific community, rather than just kind of putting them on a pedestal and saying, here you go. I think that's, to me at least, that's different.
And I think the end goal matters. If your end goal is just to have a person who represents this group, and then you're okay, done, moving on, that's tokenism. If your goal is to expand the broader diversity, and having someone from a specific group helps achieve that goal, but it's not the end goal, I think that's more okay.
I like that definition.
That's a good definition. That's awesome.
Yeah, so if you're doing it to look, so your group looks good, or if you're doing it to be an advocate for that, there is a difference in.
Yeah, I would also think about the person themselves who might be said token, because we do, at my workplace anyway, we only have one, we have more now, but we only had one woman of color for a while, and I supervise her, and she would be honest with me and say, you know, sometimes I feel like I can't speak up about diversity because I am the token black woman, and so she actually was feeling that way, and I think that's terrible, and that's not at all why she was hired. That's not why I hired her at all. And so I think you also just have to think, how is this person going to feel if we do bring them onto the panel, or we do ask them to sponsor or speak or whatever. I think you need to make sure that that person doesn't feel like they're the token, even if that wasn't your intention.
Or if it's like the only thing they bring to the table, like the only reason I'm here, as you say, is like, oh wait, like, so in Canada, you're like, if you are an Aboriginal person working in civil society, it is basically your half-time job to be the Aboriginal person. Yeah, and I think a lot of people get to be stuck in that role.
Yeah, I can speak, you know, from our board of directors experience. Our board was like, we need to have someone who's First Nations. Okay, well, why? Oh, just because we do, to have diversity. I'm like, I see where you're going, and I like where you're going, but if we just want to have people on the board for that reason, how does that feel to everybody? And when they kind of dug down a little deeper, they realized that that statement kind of was a tokenistic statement, and just saying, okay, well, this would be great, but here's what we actually want to be more inclusive rather than tokenistic.
Yeah, I guess the organization I work for that isn't NetSquared is a grant maker, so we give up money, which makes us very popular.
For free. Do you have any with you right now?
Somebody tweet that. So we fund sustainable land use initiatives, and that often includes indigenous uses of land.
And our board is an appointed board, and it is made up of all white, all upper middle class, all people with a lot of credentials. And we just like recently started to get representation from municipalities because they're a party we grant to all the time, and we would love to change our bylaws to have like somebody from First Nations join our board. And it is a little bit tokenistic, but it's also like this is a community we grant to all the time, and there's like a recognition like nothing about us without us.
Yep.
So there's like a little bit of like I don't know.
There's meaning behind, there's meaning behind it, and again, I think going back to what James was saying is, for me at least, and I'm not the expert on this, would be checking in with that person and saying like, here's what the opportunity is, and we wanna make this not tokenistic experience for you. How do you feel about this? And we value your information, your impact, etc. that you'll be able to share with the board.
I was gonna say that kind of brings us to our next topic. This is something that came up on, if any of you were on the recent organizer call, we talked a little bit about outreach. I think, Jean, we were talking about it on the call actually maybe, and I had asked a question getting back to this social network or just my personal network. How do you ensure that the outreach that you're doing, both for people to come speak at your meetups, but then also for your audience, is reflective of a more diverse set of people? Because, you know, for me and my co-organizers, we can reach out to our networks, but they're all going to be kind of similar. And so how do you ensure that the outreach that you're doing is in service of the larger community? Because we're in New York City. New York City is super diverse, yet our audience tends to not be. And so it's really frustrating to us, but we haven't quite cracked that. We don't really know how much more we need to do, and so we're trying, but if anybody wants to speak to outreach on both an audience and also a presenter standpoint to get a more diverse voice.
On a presenter standpoint, I mean, in the Drupal community, there are certain names that come up for certain topics all the time, where if you want to talk about a certain thing, this is the person you go to. And taking a step back and thinking, okay, well, who else can talk about this? Because the person, he's at all the conferences, he's got the platform. Is there somebody else who also probably has some really good or possibly different ideas about the topic who might make a good presenter or a speaker?
One of the things that came up recently at something was we had this like sort of working group at where I work, and it was like all the development coordinators across all the different departments and offices. And one of the people, my colleagues, was trying to like, she's like, a lot of these people know a lot, like they have a lot of experience, they have a wealth of knowledge, but if you ask for like presenters, they're like, oh, I don't know anything. I'm just here to learn from other people. Like they didn't see that expertise in themselves. And one of the things we're trying to figure out, and I think like also going beyond that first name that comes to mind, like how do you pull out those names when those people don't necessarily maybe they would be great presenters, they would be great teachers, they have a lot to share, but like they don't see it in themselves to share it? I'm not sure it's good.
I have a follow-up question on that. So if, as an organizer, if you do notice people like that, or you do think there are people like that in your audiences, how would you go about approaching them? And maybe they don't have public speaking skills or have never presented before. How can you help them feel more comfortable doing so? I have a personal example. We had somebody come to one of our meetups and she had a hearing impairment. And she came up to me afterwards and she said, oh, I would really like to find somebody to present on XYZ. And so she was actually the expert in it, but she thought because of her hearing impairment that she wasn't the person to speak on it. So we had lots of follow-up emails, and she actually submitted a session to NTC. I don't know if it got accepted or not, but how would you as organizers go about encouraging people who might not otherwise think that they can speak to actually speak?
I think asking the person is the first step, because I mean, I've started speaking more often at conferences recently and even like putting myself out there, but I never even considered it until somebody approached me and said, I think you should talk about this, and they offered to co-present with me, and that was a much less scary experience than trying to do it all on my own as a first time presenter. And so asking, and then also hand holding a little bit, because experienced speakers kind of, it's like old hat, whatever, but if it's your first time, just having somebody help you figure out how do you put together a slide deck that's actually going to be interesting, and things like that, is having somebody hold your hand a little bit through the process is good.
I want to speak to our comment about just asking, because we're putting together a conference, and this wasn't specifically around diversity, but it's around asking, and I asked somebody to do a presentation, and I got an email later from the person saying, thank you for pushing me out of my comfort zone. And it's not someone who I would have thought would have needed that, so it just is, people need that, and these are people who are like great professionals, but somebody had to say, come on, you can do this.
I loved Amy's example this morning when she was saying, you know, the stage, like here's a stage where we can support folks with that desire to be up on stage and in a place where they may never actually have that opportunity in other ways. So I think that we, as community folks, have the opportunity to provide that stage as necessary.
There's some other hands here.
Sorry, I jumped in.
No, you're fine. One thing we've tried is just a structural change. So rather than having one person or two people come up and just do the decks, do a panel discussion with somebody who's like the interlocutor who tries to kind of pull out and make sure everybody has a voice in the conversation. And that's worked pretty well for people who are new to speaking to, who are in that situation where they don't feel like they could put a slide together. Well, they're gonna have to put three slides for their part.
And I think Eli mentioned that the social media surgeries before, that's kind of it too, because you could almost, or the speed dating scenario, where you can kind of divide people up into like, okay, so you're at this table, and if somebody comes to you and asks questions, you could obviously answer them and support them in that, and that might be a good icebreaker to get them into that.
Yeah, no, I was gonna mention a few things in terms of diversity and inclusion. I mean, we have a lot of different nonprofit groups in this DC area, similar to New York, and what we try to do is also encourage people who are staff at nonprofits to kind of share their experience. So it's more about peer learning. It's not so much about being an expert on a specific topic, but rather, can you share like what are some of the challenges or successes that you had in your job? So it's more from that perspective. And so then they don't feel as, you know, alarmed about being seen as an expert on a topic. And then I think the other thing that's helped is the meetup platform. I know we were talking about maybe using a different platform, but we've had people come to our meetups that just found us through meetups, and it's been very diverse group, both socioeconomically and in terms of interests. We've had some young people come, and so, you know, I think looking at other platforms, maybe not just Meetup, but where people are at, and especially if you're trying to attract younger people. I know, like in Uganda, you have a lot of young people who are joining up. So, you know, I think that's also trying to look at, in terms of getting diversity to your meetings, where are the, you know, folks online and offline, and how can you kind of bring it to their attention. And the last thing I'll say is, there was an event we did where we didn't have any presenters. And it was on fundraising, and we divided it up into two groups. And the groups themselves like presented back in terms of things to do for fundraising and things not to do in crowdfunding. And it actually turned out to be one of our best sessions, because there was a lot more dialogue in the group, even though we just had a small group of people. But I think there was a lot more connections that were made. I don't know if you want to add anything about that, but I thought that was really a great way to be more inclusive. So in some ways, I feel like our regular meeting formats may not be that inclusive compared to where you have the presenters and the audience, and yes, they have questions, but it's not that as inclusive as when we did more of an open format where we had two groups and much more of a dialogue among people as opposed to presentation, Q&A.
I would just say one other note on ask. When you do ask, I am in my real life a nonprofit staff person, and a lot of times when somebody says, "Oh, will you present at such and such conference?" I'm like, "Well, what do I have to talk about? Because you know, Tuesday, well, you know, it broke, I fixed it." But you know, as opposed to when somebody approaches me and says, "It would be really great if you would consider coming to talk to us about this thing I noticed that you were doing."
Yes.
And that gives me a new way of approaching it and be like, oh, that actually was pretty cool. Okay, it was Tuesday for me, but stepping back, that's actually something pretty cool that other people might want to know about.
Be more specific in your ask, not, hey, can you come speak, but
yeah,
that's a really good idea.
Okay, so I have a couple of things. First thing is, not everyone can get out of, can do speaking. I attempted speaking at the conference here 3 years ago when I was that experience. But then I took on a role. I was another organizer for an online group. And I started calls. And I thought it was much better. And I found my strength in other places. So you can't meet someone who may not be doing well in one way, but another format is better. And when I was organizing that group, I wanted to get some new people. And no one was signing up for a topic, so I went and I reached out to some people hey, it was about guest blog post. And I said, hey, do you want to talk about this? And it's not fair. It's a good example. Go and talk and think about it for a few minutes on the call. So to people that otherwise wouldn't have been asked. And my current community for digital inclusion, I'm just now getting started on this, my second month. So most of the people in the group are fellows and librarians and maybe a few others. So I'm trying to get more diverse there to try to reach out to the people and communities. But it's I've been doing a lot of research.
Go ahead. Oh no, you go. I was going to ask a question. I was going to ask, and do you think some of those people who would be served by different formats would kind of what Prashani was saying, if you change up the format a little bit, do you think that will help people who maybe wouldn't necessarily stand up in front of a room and be needing to get on a telephone call? Do you think the format really can make a difference in terms of getting more diverse?
It could. Some people also might prefer to do reach outs.
Also, I think
that's true.
I also think that could, depending upon your population, that can broaden it such that the accessibility issue is out the door. You level the playing field in that way.
That's
Yeah, that's actually one of the, it flows really nicely from this. We were looking at things like, how does your space where you hold